What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
So aloha, welcome to our show. It is Friday, July 22nd, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of things going on in the world. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443, and Mike is in our control room dealing with various issues. And let me get this one more thing taken care of so that I can see when people are calling on in. Now, obviously, the top news, just when the media needs an excuse not to talk about Donald Trump's convention victory, and just when the media needs another excuse not to report on the latest of Hillary Clinton's scandals, we have another one of these shootings taking place. This one over in Munich, Germany, and the shooting apparently started at a McDonald's there. And the story is all over the place already, and a number of bodies has been fluctuating all over the place. Latest report from the German authorities is 6 dead, one of whom may be one of the shooters. They were saying there were 3 shooters, then they said there was only 1, then they went back to 3. Now they're saying that a shooter appeared to have shot himself. So already I'm thinking antidepressants. And you know something? They've done so many of these. They're blurring out. I'm not interested anymore. I will say, however, that the last word we got from the German authorities, no indication of ISIS terrorism connection. But they're pounding this for all it's worth, and everybody's out there, and they're closing the Munich subway system, which is actually one of 2 subway systems I've been on that actually really do a good job there. Now, before we get into the other news, I want to bring you up to date on Tropical Storm Darby. Yesterday I was commenting on how the official U.S. government computer projections were showing Darby was going to veer north before it got to the Big Island, and then this strange announcement we got on our local radio news station saying, don't rely on that, we're not really sure. And sure enough, today, the revised predictive track has Tropical Storm Darby passing north of Oahu late Sunday night. And so, given our notoriously fragile power system, there's a possibility that we may not be live for the Monday show. Doesn't mean Claire and I are in trouble, just that the infrastructure here is kind of beaten up. Now, it's 60 mile an hour, maximum sustained winds at the core. The radius of the storm is 115 miles, so this is a big one. And a lot of people are very, very worried. This is going to be a bad hurricane season here in the Pacific. There are already 3 more storms forming up behind Darby. We've got Tropical Storm Estelle. That one looks like it'll pass well to the north of us. Then there's Tropical Depression 8E. That is southeast of Estelle, and then Tropical Storm Frank, which is over by Mexico. Now, of course, that far away, it's impossible to say what's going on. But obviously, Claire and I went out to verify our emergency kit to hunker down, and I had a major disappointment because I discovered this 7-cell D-cell mag light that I've had ever since Skate Town, USA. That's 1979. The batteries had exploded inside. Now, I've had that flashlight since 1979. I've never had a problem with batteries, and I had replaced them only a year ago as part of the annual let's make sure the hurricane kit is doing okay. And apparently the quality of battery manufacture has gone downhill so much that even with the flashlight turned off, they still leaked and exploded. Now, the mag lights have a dry contact on-off switch. When it's off, it's really off. Now, for those of you building up your own emergency kits, you need to understand a lot of these newer lights, the LED lights, have electronic switches where even when the light is off, they still drain the batteries down and the batteries can go bad and go burst. So that you have to go and buy new batteries all the time, even though you're not actually losing the light. And now, because of the leaked batteries, I have to go out and replace this mag light, which I didn't want to do. I get attached to certain things. This flashlight's been part of my life for a long time. And I'm sorry, Maglite, because, their official website is the warranty won't cover burst batteries, just buy a new light. No, I'm not going to do that. Because if we live in a country where the batteries are constantly leaking and destroying everything, I'm not going to spend the money on a high-end flashlight anymore. I'm going to get the cheapest piece of crud I can find, so that when the batteries leak, as they inevitably will, it won't hurt that much to throw it away. And it is very annoying and frustrating. I remember when I was a kid, when you bought Eveready batteries and you put them in a flashlight, if they ever leaked, Eveready would buy you a replacement flashlight. No more. Not in the fascist states of the United States. The goal is to keep selling you batteries by having flashlights always draining the power when they're off and force you to buy new flashlights when the batteries leak and corrode. And it is very angering and frustrating, especially in the context of an emergency kit, which people all over are encouraged to buy and maintain, whether it's a hurricane kit here in Hawaii or an earthquake kit in Southern California or now Oklahoma. But if you can't rely on the batteries being there when you need them, and by the way, as a general rule in your emergency kit, you shouldn't have the batteries in anything anyway because of that problem. It's just I'd never had a problem with this mag light before. And the mag light is still the same. It's the batteries that got cheap. And it is possible to make burst-proof batteries, but nobody wants to spend the money doing it because then the stockholders get a smaller dividend check and they will cry and throw themselves on the floor and pound their hands and kick their feet. How dare you shortchange us by making a quality product in the United States? All right, well, that's my rant about this today, but I am very upset over the continuing decay in the quality of life in this country under our fascist regime. Now, Donald Trump, of course, last night got up on the Republican convention and did his formal acceptance speech, which was not a surprise, and it was a really good speech. And a lot of people were talking about it, and his promise to put America first, which has been part of his campaign slogan all along. And amazingly enough, the Anti-Defamation League has declared that Donald Trump's slogan or motto or agenda of putting America first is clearly anti-Semitic. How dare you put America first when you're living in America? That's clearly anti-Semitic because real Americans always put Israel first. By the way, back in 1941, the Jewish Voice, published in New York, January 1941, page 23, declared opposition to communism was anti-Semitic. You can see how ridiculous they've gotten with this whole nonsense. Now, Donald Trump's speech hit the issue of illegal immigration, and it hit the economy, and he wants to make some major changes. And here is a call to Rivero's Rangers, in fact, everybody else listening to this show. You're all deputized. For Donald Trump to bring about any substantive change to the United States of America, it is not enough to vote him into the White House with a too-big-to-rig landslide. We have to vote in a Congress that will work with him and not try and block and obstruct every move. That means we, the people, through the ballot box, have to pink slip all these Israel firsters, Wall Street lovers, all the war hawks, and just give that Congress a good cleaning out this November, because it needs one. So I'm hoping that there will be a tremendous anti-incumbency fever sweeping this nation, and we're starting to see indications. A lot of the old guard that were just used to winning re-election after re-election after re-election, now all of a sudden they're in real fights against new challengers, and that's a good thing. Now, we're seeing a story out of Investment Watch blog. Early indicators showing Donald Trump's Republican speech was a huge hit with voters. And he really did fire them up, and that's a good thing. And, of course, over at Hillary's campaign headquarters, the ashtrays are flying because Hillary is dealing with a badly factionalized Democratic Party, mostly over her treatment of Bernie Sanders. Let's take a phone call here. Veronica in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Well, speaking of the congressman, I did write to mine this morning, and I let him know that it needs to be brought to his attention that he needs to have Trump's back. We, the people, do want Trump. And then he can go down in history one of two ways. He can help restore the constitutional republic, or he can help usher in one world order fascism and taking the last few liberties that this country has. and that I'm expecting a lot more than a generic response from an intern. I'll be looking forward to some publicity on that in the news, on his Facebook page, and other social media, and that he's going to be held accountable. I see Obama and Cruz are going to be having a little powwow on Air Force One, so I'm anxious for your thoughts on that. And I would like to know your feelings on us photographing our ballots so that we have proof that we voted for Trump. And that's all I have, and I'll wait for your response, and I thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know how practical it is to photograph the ballot or the computer screen unless you can verify that your absolute ballot was altered on the far side. The problem is the entire voting system is set up ostensibly to protect you from retaliation for your votes, but in actuality to keep the election process completely hidden. That's why Bev Harris called her website blackboxvoting.org, because the election system is intentionally shielded in order to protect the election riggers. And we have seen it get more and more out of control. I remember back during the Iowa caucuses, where the votes are supposed to be counted right in front of the caucusers, and instead they just took the boxes into a back room and just came out later and said, well, these are the results. Take our word for it. We wouldn't lie to you. We're politicians. And, there is a major problem. And those electronic machines are a big, big part of it. And, again, between now and November, if you have not seen Hacking Democracy, wonderful documentary on HBO, you need to hunt it down and watch it, and you need to share it with everybody that you know. Because there is, given Hillary's performance during the primaries, she is clearly going to be trying to steal the election in November. And the only thing that's going to prevent that from happening is public awareness that our elections are not trustworthy, they're not secure, they're not honest, they're not verifiable. Our election system is an international joke at this point. So we need to keep making a big stink about this. Now, as far as your member of Congress is concerned, if they're up for re-election, then yeah, your concerns will have an impact. Obviously, everyone in the House of Representatives is looking at a campaign for November. For the Senate, it's only about 1/3 of them. But you need to find the ones who are up for re-election, and you need to direct your ire and your concerns at them. And if they are not satisfying you, organize among your local community, your local district, and say it's time for new blood in there. And you're probably going to get a very positive response, because we're hearing, again, a lot of these entrenched power brokers are all of a sudden facing real stiff opposition to regaining their jobs. We're going to go to another phone call. Alan in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Aloha, and God bless you and Claire, and I'm praying for you guys this weekend. I know you touched on this yesterday, too, and today. I think you hit the nail on the head with the anti-incumbent movement. And just like a good running back, you have to have a defense to tackle and let the guy make the touchdown. And with having the Congress and the Senate that we have just stumbling around, it will not work. And I thank you for that mention, and I think it's imperative to have that, Mike.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just putting Donald Trump in the White House won't change anything, because Congress will dig in their heels. Trump will be firmly in control of the executive branch, and that gives him a lot of power and authority. But Congress can move to block him at every turn, and they will, because Congress is very much part of this internal narcocracy establishment, and they will. They'll block him if they still have their jobs next year. So it's time for a clean sweep and get all these old political establishment hacks out of our government and start putting in some new blood. And the new blood will go on in with the reminder that their name on their office door in Congress is written with dry erase marker, and we the people have got that rag.
Mike, may I also say, and it's up to us to support people like yourself, which I pray people will do, but I think we also need fresh blood in the patriot movement, too, because there's been a lot of people that are even still never Trumpers, and I don't get it anymore, and that's what we need to refresh with some of our people that are supposedly speaking for us, too.
Well, there are certain individuals in the independent media who have been compromised. They're the ones that seem to have huge amounts of money to work with. You always have to be suspect. What strings, what controls came in with that money. And nobody who's rich is handing out money to support the truth movement. They're trying to hijack it, just the way they hijack the corporate media. So you do need to be very, very careful. The advantage on our side is we have so many people who are now part of the independent media. They can't buy us all off. They don't have that kind of money. As far as the people online who are still opposed to Trump and pro-Hillary, you need to recognize a lot of those people are bought and paid for public relations workers. There's a legal term for it. It's called grassroots lobbying. And here's where you see that the system is rigged against the people. The current lobbying laws say that a lobbyist must identify themselves as such and who they represent when they speak to a politician. But the laws say that lobbyists can present themselves as ordinary citizens to other citizens and not identify that they're a lobbyist. That's called grassroots lobbying, and it's a big, big business. If you go to the website of any of the big public relations firms like Hill & Knowlton, you will see they advertise a service for so much money. They will load up discussion boards and blogs and everything with all kinds of operatives who pretend to be ordinary people pushing whatever that agenda happens to be.
Well, Mike, again, I'm praying for you and Claire, and you really make my day, and you're very important to a lot of us. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, Mike. All
right, well, thank you very much. And again, on its current track, I'm not expecting the storm to be a major inconvenience, but the electrical power system on this island is very fragile. And so I'm concerned about potential blackouts, but I'm not worried that Claire and I are going to get washed out to sea. For one thing, we're up on a hill about 400 feet above sea level. So, we're just going to plastic everything over to keep the rain out and hunker down and do whatever couples do when the lights are out. All righty, getting on back to, thank you for the phone call, Alan. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here. Donald Trump is talking about making America safe, about keeping us protected, about closing the borders and not leaving the door open for potential terrorists and agent provocateurs to wander on through. Now, the Democrats are already out there saying, well, we have a plan to make America safe, just like Donald Trump. Actually, they don't. According to this report coming out of Investment Watch blog, the entire Democratic Party platform plan to protect America is just 2 pages long. It's a couple of notes, wishful thinking, that's it. No real substantive planning here. Now, another article coming out of Russia Insider. The U.S. regime media is in full meltdown mode over Trump's NATO remarks. And that's because Donald Trump is saying, if the other NATO nations aren't going to keep their commitments to us, why should we automatically step in and get involved in their conflicts with their neighbors? Especially if they're the ones causing the conflict. Now, right now, the war hawks and war profiteers in the United States are having full-on epileptic seizures over the possibility of a president who thinks peaceful trade is a better way to go than a certain-to-fail attempt at world conquest. Because these neocons and these war hawks, if they don't have a war, they don't feel important. Nobody pays attention to them. And nobody really should either. When your entire business and consciousness is war, you will work to create war as long as somebody else pays for it and somebody else's children die in it. That's how these things get done. Now, former ambassador to NATO has said Donald Trump's NATO comments are reckless and disturbing. The neocons are all in a lather. Their stocks in the military-industrial complex are at risk. This shall not stand. We've got to take a break for commercials. We've got a caller on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And also, I forgot earlier to welcome our on-air affiliates back to our little network connection as well. We're talking about current events. We've covered Munich a little bit. Now we're into the political campaigns and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And before I start taking phone calls, because we've got a bunch of callers waiting on the line here, I'm noticing on the news where even though this shooting incident appears to be over, the Munich authorities are going through the full drill. They've shut down the subway. They're doing all this stuff. And I think I have a sense of what's going on here. First responders always love to play with the new stuff. the new authority, the new MRAP, the new gun, the new bulletproof vests and everything. And I got a taste of this myself many, many years ago when I was still living with my family in West Covina, California. These are my high school years. And it was a July 5th, because the day before had been July 4th and we had fireworks. And apparently somebody in the neighborhood had fired off a rocket which landed on the roof of our house. And it just smoldered all night, and then the next morning there was a little bit of a fire that burned a hole about, that big in the shingles. That was it. So we called 911 and called the fire department. Meanwhile, we're up on the roof with a garden hose. We put out the fire. What we didn't realize was the day before July 4th was when the brand new City of West Covina Fire Department had been activated. They were transitioning over from all the old stations and all the old equipment, and they were now with the new stations and the new equipment, and everybody showed up for this alarm. We were apparently the first fire alarm to come in with the brand new city fire department, and they brought everything, including the cherry picker, which had the boom arm up, 8 stories high, was so high over the roof of our single-story ranch-style house. They had to use binoculars to look back down. And they almost seemed disappointed that there wasn't more fire for them to play with. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. Oh, we've had an event. We're going to go full bore on that. All right, let's talk to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you might have been the original backdraft.
Maybe.
Backdraft the prequel.
Yes.
Hey, Mike, if you listen to some of these politicians like Hillary and John Kerry, they'll tell you what the truth is. Remember when Hillary said about NATO after Donald Trump? What are people going to think? We're running some kind of protection racket? That's exactly what it is. The NATO is an enforcer for a protection racket of the Anglo-American Empire. That's what it is, folks.
Yes, it absolutely is. And, again, going all the way back to George Washington's farewell address where he said, beware of foreign entanglements. Because George Washington was very familiar with the history of Europe and how everybody's alliances with everybody else would take a small little disagreement between two nations and turn it into this continent-wide conflagration. And he didn't want to see that happen to the United States. Unfortunately, nobody listened to Washington, and we got tangled up with World War I and World War II, and now we're leading the way, apparently, into World War III.
Well, this protection racket, I don't know if people can tell, it is coming to an end. And there was a previous caller you had who said, that we have, I don't remember the other day, he said we had aircraft carriers and stuff. Well, you don't have anything after those are in Davy Jones' locker. So
there's
going to be a new system coming up, and it's from Eurasia, and I don't know when it's coming, sooner or later, but this system is coming to a close. You can see
all empires fall. All empires fall. I mean, that's the reality. And again, the present United States government is showing striking parallels not only with the collapse of the former Soviet Union, but with the collapse of the Roman Empire itself.
All empires fall. Hey, Mike, on that shooting in Germany, do you see what one of the reporters is reporting? They heard one of the shooters shouting, Germans for Germany. I'm like, where did we hear that before? Yeah. When the MP got killed in Britain, right? So it's the same BS line, It's the same modus operandi,
Well, it's rather interesting because already the German authorities are saying there's absolutely no connection with ISIS terror groups. They're saying it's not an ISIS terror attack, but if it's a backlash to the immigration problem, this is going to put even more political pressure on Angela Merkel because Germans see her as personally responsible for all the problems they've been having in Cologne and everywhere else and all the sexual assaults and the increase in crime and now, the axe attack on the train and now this shooting at the mall. And everybody thinks Merkel is personally responsible. Okay, Dustin, I'm going to let you go. We got another commercial break. We got other callers waiting on the line. I'm going to take your call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And during the commercial break, I was actually looking at AROutfitting.com for rechargeable tactical flashlights, where you don't have to worry about store-bought batteries exploding or anything. And they got some really nice units. I love flashlights. I like to have flashlights. I'm not scared of the dark or anything. I just think flashlights are cool things to have, along with Swiss Army knives and various other goodies. Okay, back to the phones here. Laura in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to tell you that somebody did step up to the plate today. Today, Dr. David Duke signed papers to run for the Senate for Louisiana.
Well, I think that's a good thing for him to do. I mean, he's a former member of Congress, so it's not an entirely outrageous idea.
He's won 3 elections before.
Yes. He's a very smart man. We've had him on the show. And, you know, he makes a lot of sense when you actually listen to him. Of course, if you listen to other people's descriptions of him, then you think he's got to be slime. But we're going through that same thing with Donald Trump, where when you talk to people who say they're going to vote for Hillary, well, they don't like Hillary, but Donald Trump hates women, and Donald Trump is racist. And really? Where did you hear this from Donald Trump himself? Oh, no, it was on the TV, so of course it's got to be true. And here's the funny thing. If you look at Donald Trump's history, nobody ever called him misogynist or racist until he started running for the office. And so you really do need to go back to the first source. We saw a little bit of that this last week with the 28 pages that were finally declassified. And there were all these pundits out there say it proves Saudi Arabia did it. And what they're hoping is you didn't actually bother to read the document yourself. You're just going to sit there and let them tell you what to think. But fewer and fewer Americans are actually doing that because, remember, back in 2003, Saudi Arabia wanted these 28 pages declassified to get rid of all the rumor and innuendo that was floating around here. There's nothing in the 28 pages but rumor and innuendo. You know, this 9/11 hijacker may have known this person who may have been in contact with somebody in Saudi Arabia. And when you add to that the fact that FBI Director Robert Mueller came on out and admitted they didn't really know who was on those airplanes, that all those identities of Middle Eastern men appeared to have been stolen, you know, then it doesn't make any sense to say that this 28 pages in any way connects Saudi Arabia to 9/11. It's a hoax built on another hoax.
Right. Everything's a lie anymore.
That's true.
Anyway, Dr. Duke's, it's DukeForSenate.com is his brand new website. If anybody wants to go to that. DukeForSenate.com. Also, I was going to tell you, I had seen on Turner Classic Movies a pre-war movie, and people were putting up signs that said, like our political signs, that said no foreign entanglements.
Yes.
I thought, wow, that'd be a good thing to do today.
I think, yeah, it would be a good thing. We should have been doing it all along. But, you know, the politicians and the military-industrial complex, the more foreign entanglements there are, the more money they will make.
I didn't think of it until I saw this movie that people were putting up those type of signs.
Well, again, you know, it's people who understand history and understand George Washington's warning in his farewell address, you know, that foreign entanglements, that's an iconic phrase from American history.
That's right, right. So everybody can get a sign made, put it out in your yard. I'm going to do that.
Well, right next to your Trump for President sign, I assume.
Yeah, I've got one out. I had one out before the Michigan primary. I had a Trump sign out.
Okay, well, you know, good luck with keeping it up there because they're already catching people stealing these signs off of front lawns. Probably better to just hang it inside your front window.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. I just want to let everybody know about Dr. Duke.
All right, I'm going to link to his website now here. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Bonjour, comment vas-tu?
Hi, Michael. This is Kathleen in Paris.
Hello, Kathleen. What's on your mind today?
Well, I'm looking downstairs from my window of my apartment, and I see the police car with the blue light going around. I don't know what's going on in my neighborhood, but, you know, the police are there. And the police are everywhere here in Paris, as you know. Not just the local police, but the gendarme and all kinds of police. Anyway, that's not why I called. I just happened to see when I called you that the police were downstairs from my window. I really wanted to tell you that I thank you for your show, and I have abandoned several of my news sources because now I listen to your show, the complete show, every day.
Well, thank you very much for those
because
kind words.
I learned very much from you. I just hear you say something which is off the cuff for you because you assume everybody knows, but me, I don't. So I'm doing a lot of research and learning a lot from you, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much for that. And again, I know that sometimes I tend to talk in context of people knowing what the earlier references are, and given that I've got a lot of listeners who've been here for following me for decades and a lot of newcomers, I'm trying to walk a fine line between that. But again, don't ever take anything I'm saying at face value either. Please, if there's one thing I'm trying to do, it's to inspire you all to go on out and search for yourself. And so you're doing the right thing. You get a gold star on your report card today.
Thank you. But can I ask you one thing, because I really want to know your opinion on something. I'm an American. You maybe can hear from my accent.
Yes.
But I live in Paris.
Yes.
And I think I probably know a lot more about the what's going on in America than some other people in America, because I do follow a lot of news.
Yes.
So my question to you is, because I've heard you talk often about the illegal immigrants, and I do understand the word illegal, and I know that, you're right about that. However, I want your opinion about the fact that a lot of the people, the illegal immigrants who are trying to go to America, they are insecure and suffering violence and crime in their own country because of American policies in their countries.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. All these people saying that we should be sympathetic to the plight of all of these refugees. All right, fine. Let's stop the process that made them refugees in the first place. Now, that's a drastic oversimplification, because we know in the case of a lot of the refugees going to Europe, they're being encouraged and even lured by these various non-governmental groups who are promising them all kinds of free stuff when they get to Europe. A lot of this is being funded by George Soros, and it's a deliberate attempt to try and dilute the ethnic identity of the European nations, to make it easier to merge them all together into a single global union. If everybody in France is a mishmash of ethnic groups, and everybody's in Germany is an identical mishmash of various ethnic groups, then there's no real reason to think in terms of France or Germany anymore. It's just the EU as a single block, eventually to be merged with the North American Union, and so forth. And again, that's why we have this open borders policy, allowing Central American, South American, and Mexicans to just pour into this country in order to create this blended ethnic group in all of these nations, so that there's no more point in talking about America versus Mexico versus Nicaragua, because it's all the same people over and over again. And we start thinking solely in terms of that North American Union, and that's part of the New World Order agenda.
Well, what about the fact that, which I hear from some sources, but not so many, but from one of my sources, I hear that, in fact, there's more Americans trying to get away from the extreme militarization of America and going to Mexico.
Well, there's currently definitely an exodus of Americans from the United States, and it's primarily among the highly skilled people who are much desired by other countries, because the United States sort of turned its back on manufacturing over the last 30 years. People who are really good at manufacturing and building things have been lured away to other countries where they are treated with the respect that they deserve. And exactly the same thing happened when the United States was first formed, where people in Europe who were tired of their very rigid social structure, where no matter how hard you work, you may not leave the social class you're born into, they left and they came to America, and they brought their innovation and skills and talents with them. And that's why early America was just a hotbed of invention and creation. And at the same time, European technological advances ground to an absolute halt. It's called a brain drain. And we're definitely seeing that here in the United States right now.
Because, I understand now. See, many years ago, I started a business in Oklahoma. And now I understand that if you want to open a lemonade stand someplace, that there's so much paperwork and bureaucracy to open a lemonade stand that, just forget about it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, isn't there a story? Isn't there a story about a 13-year-old kid who wanted to open a hot dog stand?
Yeah, we reported that just a few days ago. He saved up $1,200 to get himself a little hot dog stand so that he could raise money for his parents who are unable to earn any money. I think I recall they're actually disabled. And the city came in and shut him down because they viewed him as unfair competition to the 8 established restaurants in that same city.
What's up with that?
Well, it's called fascism. And that's where government authority and corporate interests are totally aligned against the general population. And that's exactly the kind of abuses you're going to see, along with poor quality products in the stores. And
some of this is coming on. Some of this is coming on because it was about 30-odd years ago when I opened a business in Oklahoma, and it was like nothing, it was so easy, and in 1 year we were making money, and it was very easy, but I understand that because it's not so easy now, and the bureaucracy and the taxes and the licenses, which, you can call it a license or a bribe, but now people are fleeing to other countries.
Yeah, they are. We're over-regulated, and the regulation is never against the big corporations who are the problem. It's always against the little guy. And this gets back to that quote by Ayn Rand that we talked about yesterday. When the people who produce, have to first get permission from people who don't produce, your society is doomed. And that's exactly where we are. We reward indolence and laziness through welfare and food stamps, and we discourage achievement by just throwing roadblocks in the way. I remember this story a little earlier in the year. Apparently, during this graduation ceremony, there was an honors student who was forbidden from wearing the extra little banner signifying he was an honor student because it was going to make the other students feel bad. Well, when we live in a society where achievement and excellence is discouraged because it's not politically correct. And I'll tell you what really annoys me about all these politically correct people. These are people who have created a fantasy world to live in which they are automatically superior for whatever reason. And then when others refuse to live in that same fantasy world, they get all upset and angry and, you're supposed to see the world the way I do. No, each of us sees the world the way we each see the world. And we see people living in a fantasy world, like Caitlyn Jenner, thinks she's a woman now. No, she's still a man. Sorry, all the makeup and surgery in the world isn't going to change the DNA. But that whole political correctness, it's all about your fantasy becomes more important than the reality. Like these guys saying, well, in my heart, I'm a woman, so I can use the woman's room. And Target actually went along with that nonsense. No, that isn't the way it works. You're living in this fantasy world if you think, even though you have the body of a man, that you're really secretly a woman inside. And they just get really upset when everybody else doesn't want to move into that fantasy world with them.
Yeah, I live in Europe, and so I just can't understand these people getting upset about using, if the ladies' room is full, I go in the men's room, and nobody cares.
Yeah. When I worked at a film company in Rome, they had unisex restrooms, and it wasn't a problem, But again, they're trying to make an issue of it to get people riled up and supporting a political agenda because they can't talk about the wars, they can't talk about the economy, they certainly can't talk about Hillary's scandals, so they fan up race hatred and restroom stuff and gay marriage and abortion, and every election cycle we see the same thing where they fan up all this discord about fairly trivial stuff because they don't want the voters thinking about what's going on that really does affect their lives.
And about the fact that, I mean, what do you think that we as Americans owe these poor people who are fleeing violence because of the American policies? I didn't quite get what you said.
Okay, could you run that by me one more time?
Yeah, it's about what do you think America owes these people who are fleeing the violence, that the violence is there because of this war on drugs and policies that America made. So it's like we made the problem.
That's right.
Now they can't live in their homes, so they're fleeing. But yes, they're illegal.
Well, I'm drawing a line between the illegal immigrants that are coming into the United States from Mexico and South America, because there are no wars there driving them. These are people who are trying to get into America because they're dodging prosecution in their own country. In some cases, the governments are simply emptying their prisons and throwing them across the border. Let them be the U.S. problem. And as a matter of fact, Obama apparently has released a bunch of these criminal, illegal immigrants back into the American society because their source country, their home countries, refuse to take them back. And it's ridiculous. Now, when you're talking about the refugees from the war-torn areas, yeah, U.S. foreign policy has created that problem. And the U.S. government is never going to admit it. They're going to say, oh, these are people striving for a better life. No, they're striving not to get hit with a drone. That's why they're running. Plus, there is that group that's being intentionally lured to Europe with promises of all kinds of wonderful free stuff. And when they get to Europe and discover they're not getting all the free stuff they were told, they start acting out, which is where we're getting the violence and the sexual assaults. And, they're feeling very much double-crossed. And it's their own fault for believing all these promises, but still it's caused friction between the refugees and the indigenous cultural population. We got to let you go here, Kathleen. Thank you for the phone call.
Thank you.
We got 2 more callers waiting on the line. We're going to get to you as soon as we come back from these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we take the phone calls here, we got an email from a female listener to the show saying, I once had the body of a man. I called it my husband, which I think is very cute. All right, back to the phones here. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, CO Michael.
Hello.
Yes, I needed a good chuckle, and thanks for that little tidbit there. Touche to them, because I have the same situation over here, so c'est la vie. Anyway, I got a question for you. You mentioned about Trump's future administration or cabinet, whatever you want to call it, and the various different roles in it. My question to you is this. You made a commentary about him appointing you as head of NASA.
That was a joke.
If that were to be the case, what would you do?
I would order all the ground crews to dress up like apes every time an astronaut was coming back to Earth.
Dress like a what?
Apes.
Uh-huh.
I guess you have to be a fan of science fiction movies to get the joke on that one.
Well, no, I tend to watch them, but I tend to avoid the ones with Planet of the Apes and all that because it's like going into overkill with the genetic engineering and all that stuff. So, go figure. But that was a good joke.
Okay.
Never mind. I'm leaving it alone. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Francis. And we're going to switch over to Alan in California. Aloha, Alan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you. I was going to ask you your opinion on one of the speeches at the convention, but first I just wanted to also say that I know you talk a lot about statin drugs, and I'm a perfect case for your point that statin drugs can pretty much mess up your physical health. I was on them for about a year. And just lots of weight gain. I had tired all the time. I was starting to become diabetic. They were just basically destroying my body. My memory was going. And as soon as I got off them and changed my diet and everything, I mean, within a month, it was like a 180. So a lot of, some of your listeners out there that are on statins, I'm just a person out there that was getting my body destroyed by them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's a terrible situation where the drugs you're getting from your local pharmacy are actually more dangerous for you than the recreational drugs you can buy on the street corner. At least those are natural and organic, and they don't have, unknown side effects. But the current model is, to invent a new drug, that didn't exist before in nature, so you can patent it and have market exclusivity. And you really ought to read those package inserts, where they lay out just how dangerous these things are. But as long as they continue to make money, and the government, the FDA is going to look the other way, they sell them until so many people have been harmed that they finally have to do something about it. It's almost like a numbers game. We're going to sell this medication, and when we lose so many thousands of people and have to deal with those lawsuits, then we'll come on out and have another product here. Alan, thank you very much for the phone call. We got to let you go for station identification. Another phone call waiting after these few moments. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to go back to the phones. John in Barbados, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes. I was reading this story about the THC in the water supply in Colorado.
Yes.
I expect to see a massive reduction in cancer and other defects appear suddenly.
Well, there are going to be a lot more. I imagine we're going to have a lot less domestic violence and bar fights and road rage there as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's going to really ruin the pharmaceutical industry's day because it's being delivered free of charge in the water supply.
Well, and of course there are out there saying, don't drink your water, don't bathe in it, don't even give it to your pets. The last thing we need are a bunch of stoned pussycats staggering around the neighborhood, inconveniencing the traffic and so forth. Yeah, you have to wonder where that all came from. But again, when you look at Flint, Michigan, a little THC in your tap water is the least of your worries.
Absolutely. Anyway, so there was, last night we were all, 2 Americans, 2 Australians, a Frenchman and myself, were listening to the Donald Trump RNC speech, his acceptance speech. One American thought it was reasonable. The other American thought it was just Republican nonsense, apart from 2 items. One was it's about Iran and other Middle East aspects. And the 2 Australians and myself, well, it was just Republican really, nonsense. But most of it. But there was one young guy. He's in his early 20s, and he thought it was good. I think it's good that the Republican Party have come together behind the one candidate and at least give him 95% support. But I often wonder how Mr. Trump is going to pay for all these things he says he's going to do when America's national debt will be well over $20 trillion by the time he takes office.
Well, I think that Donald Trump is looking at bringing industry back into this country so that the American people can make money to get the consumer economy going again. And if he pulls back from all of this warmongering, that's a huge amount of money that can be spent on rebuilding America. And there is cash flow still happening in this country. It's a question of priorities and where that money is going to go. So I think that's what's happening there. Now, obviously, from my point of view, it's less that Donald Trump is attractive versus the fact that Hillary is just going to be a continuance of the same policies we've had under the Clintons and the Bushes all along. Those policies are not working. And Americans want a change. They're tired of business as usual. They're tired of politics as usual. Donald Trump represents that change. Hillary just represents more of the same, and it just is not working at this point. Okay?
Like the other item I did applaud was his idea on NATO. If countries don't put enough effort into NATO, America won't come to the aid. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we want America out of Europe. We don't want your military bases, these nuclear warhead magnets in our country at all. We want them out.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you one tiny bit for wanting America out. Again, people who live in Europe, they see the scars from the first 2 world wars just every day when they're driving around, going to work, going to visit, they're right there. The scars are still there. Here in the United States, the last battles we had on our soil was the Civil War, and except for a few carefully preserved monuments, there are no scars left. And so for most Americans who have not served in the military, war is an abstraction. They tend to look at it more like it's some kind of a video game. And that's why Americans are willing to go along with the military-industrial complex. They don't have a real visceral reason to stand up and say, no, this is a bad idea.
Continuing on with the same vein, in Syria, Turkey, that theater there, the movement of Turkey towards Russia and Iran seems to be putting some real backbone in the effort to clear the Syrian country of these Takfiris.
Well, wait a minute. You need to remember the U.S. agenda. Forget what they're saying about various rebel groups and everything. The U.S. agenda has not changed in 5 years. It is to get Assad out. And that agenda is now critically injured by this botched coup d'etat in Turkey because, Erdogan is clearly pivoting away from the West and away from NATO and away from the European Union, and he's aligning with Russia and Iran and China. And Turkey was like the keystone to the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And without the keystone, the whole arch is going to collapse. And so this is a major, this could be the end of the push to start the New World War in the Middle East. Of course, they can still provoke Russia and China some other way. But it's a major, major foreign policy disaster.
Well, I posed one question in a forum, and it was like this. Is Obama or the Obama administration pivot to Asia an admission of failure in the Middle East, and they seem to be drawing down quite quickly in that area? Now, the Incirlik now is off limits to American flights. It seems that this whole plan is falling apart in the Middle East for America.
Well, it's not just the Middle East, it's all over Europe. We're hearing all these protests and riots, in France, now in Germany, Armenia. It really is, the people of planet Earth are just really fed up with all these oligarchs around them. Anyway, John, I need to cut you off here because I'm way behind on my talking points. I got a lot to cover before Claire comes on in the third hour, and we got to take one more phone call, and then we're going to close the phone lines for a while. Andrea in Oklahoma, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Andrea, are you there? I am not. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello. There you are. Yes.
Hello.
Hello. What's on your mind?
Hello. Aloha.
Aloha, Nui Nui.
Yes. Last night with Donald Trump, he was saying we're going to get rid of NAFTA. And he didn't say we were going to get rid of GATT, but we hope that he gets rid of that too. The thing is, I wish you could be his advisor. My gosh, if you could say, look, Israel has 200 to maybe 400 nuclear bombs in Nimona. And we have laws, because he said we are going to enforce laws, the Glenn Act and the Symington Amendment, that we're not supposed to be sending money to any country that doesn't allow inspections of their nuclear bombs, and they won't draw their borders. They're not nice to their friends, but yet we're persistent at wanting to be their friends.
Again, I want to go back to something that a lot of people have observed. Hillary's people are already out there trying to say, well, Donald Trump is pro-Israel, and if you have a problem with that, you should vote for Hillary. Forgetting, of course, that Hillary is very pro-Israel. Reading the Israeli media, it is very clear that Israel knows they will get whatever they want from Hillary. They're not really convinced by Donald Trump. He's making some very careful statements. And let's see. Hang on a second. I got to clear. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just dealing with some technical control room issues here and limited monitor space on the thing. I think that Donald Trump will evaluate each request from Israel on its merits. He's not going to be a knee-jerk, I will obey Tel Aviv. For one thing, because Donald Trump was not in the government when 9/11 happened, threats by Israel to blackmail him by revealing the truth about 9/11 are probably not going to have much of an effect. Trump's attitude might be, go ahead, admit that you did it. And, yes, our politicians were involved, but they're all out of office now. He might just call their bluff.
Well,
but looking at the Israeli media, it is clear they want Hillary. They do not want Trump. Okay, so anyway, Andrea, I'm going to let you go. We're trying to clear the phone line so I can get back to some stories. I think we have Bob in Las Vegas. Bob, are you there? Hello? No, I guess we don't have Bob in Las Vegas. How about Wes? Is Wes still
Mike, can you hear me?
who am I talking to?
Aloha.
Aloha. Who is this?
Hey, I heard that story I read on your website about the water in Colorado testing positive for THC. Entirely impossible with a home drug test kit. It's not possible. You could literally pour bong water onto a drug test kit and it's not going to show positive.
Well, I don't know that we're necessarily dealing with bong water. It may be that somebody is doing some processing of the raw THC itself, and there's some effluent runoff on that. Who knows?
If that was the case, the water would be green.
No, so, wait a minute. The THC itself is colorless. The green in marijuana is the chlorophyll.
That is a negative. It is. You're right. It is colorless, but like for instance, I'm telling you from experience, when you're making like bubble hash or whatnot, the water turns green because THC is not water soluble. It's the oil. So if that was the case, that there was a bunch of THC inside their tank, it would be green. It would be coming out green.
Well, I'll look at the issue a little bit.
The chlorophyll would be in there with it.
Yeah, the chlorophyll would be in there with it. Okay, Bob, thanks a lot for the insight. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to go to Wes in Idaho. Aloha, Wes. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael.
Oh, wait a minute. We got a lot of complaints from your call yesterday about sending the blacks back to Africa. So I think
that's what Thomas Jefferson
well,
said.
I don't care. It's not appropriate to today. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to go back to the news. And let me remind. Okay, there we are. We're dealing with a bunch of issues here. Okay, back to the real news, because I got a bunch of stuff to cover here. Now, everybody is looking at the decline in Hillary's poll numbers and Trump's popularity in surging, but GovernmentSlaves.info has a very, very good article that Clinton could still win in November because she controls the voting machine industry. They're all on her side. Remember that Stanford research project found that where paper ballots and hand counts were being used, the official results matched the exit polls. In precincts where they're using those electronic machines, which are notoriously easy to rig, Hillary was always getting an 8 to 9% advantage over the exit polls. And the owners of these voting machine companies have been donating to Hillary's campaign and her so-called charitable foundation. So Trump is going to have a landslide in November. Call it too big to rig. That's what we need in November. But there are groups who are going to vote for Hillary Clinton no matter what she's done. And that would be like the people who got their Obama phones, everybody who lives for government entitlements and free stuff, they're going to vote for Hillary because Hillary's promising more free stuff. Hillary's campaigning on a promise to take stuff away from those who are working and producing and give it to the people who vote for her, including the illegal immigrants. And that's a major, major problem. They're not supposed to be voting anyway. And all over the country, Hillary's supporters are going to court to say, oh, it's discriminatory to demand a photo ID. No, it isn't. If you're a legal American citizen, it is not a problem that you would have some kind of photo identification. The only people who don't have photo ID are the illegal immigrants, and they're not supposed to vote. But they're all going to vote for Hillary because she's promising to make them citizens. And I have a real problem with that. Because this nation, the United States of America, was built by the American people, by the legal American citizens, including those who immigrated here through the legal process. And we built it generation after generation after generation in order that we would leave it to the next generation of Americans, our children. And here we have politicians who are literally trying to steal our children's inheritance and barter it away to illegal immigrants in exchange for votes. To me, that is a major betrayal of the American nation for political gain. The bankers want Hillary in. They're all going to support her. The military-industrial complex, because she's going to be a real war president. Large corporations want her. And finally, there is still a contingent of people out there who are going to vote for Hillary Clinton just because she's a woman and it's politically correct to finally have a woman president. And these are the same people who urged us to vote for Barack Obama because it was time to have a black president. And look what we got. Massive NSA spying, Obamacare, higher taxes, poorer quality services, if there are any services at all, and more wars all across the globe. We need to raise our standards a little bit above selecting presidents from an approved list of gender and ethnic types. Interview with Philip Anderson. Voting machines are easy to hack, and they are. They are. And again, blackboxvoting.org, Bev Harris's website, and the HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. Our election system is a joke. It is wide open to fraud by design. Yet another lawsuit's been filed over the irregularities between the official results and the exit polls in the Democratic primaries. It's just happening all over the country. Corporate media doesn't want you to know about that. You're supposed to believe that Hillary Clinton is the people's choice. No, she's the choice of money launderers and bankers, drug smugglers, people who want a government that protects the guilty while punishing the innocent. And we're already there. Again, look at all the police civil forfeiture seizures against people who have not been convicted or even charged with any crime. The police are stealing more from the American people than the burglars, robbers, and muggers put together. And that same justice system came on out and admitted Hillary Clinton committed felony violations of Title 18, but we're just not going to prosecute her because she's Hillary. Okay. And let's see. Okay, there we are. Now then. We are hearing leaks now of Hillary's top two choices to be her vice president running mate. Tim Kaine, former governor of Virginia, he's a global warming nut. He's absolutely convinced carbon dioxide will destroy the world and we have to carbon tax everybody. And is also on the warpath against the coal industry. The other choice being considered is Senator Cory Booker, who used to be mayor of Newark, New Jersey. And obviously they're all hardcore socialists. So not sure that she's going to get as big a bang out of her VP selection as Donald Trump did. Now then, remember that scandal with Jeff Epstein and his little orgy island, and all of the world's elite were down there, including Bill Clinton, one of the princes from the royal family of Great Britain. I forget which one. I don't even care anymore. And it involved solicitation of underage girls for sexual purposes. And Epstein got this sweetheart deal. He basically needs to, he goes to jail at night only. And he sleeps in a section of the prison that is closed off. He doesn't ever have to interact with the other prisoners. During the day, he's allowed to be under house arrest in his Palm Beach mansion. This deal was so rigged, they tried to hide it from the victims, who are now filing a lawsuit saying, how the heck did this come along? And this lawsuit may reopen up just what was going on at Epstein's Island, who was involved, and who pulled strings to get this guy this sweetheart deal, wrist slap. That may be why Bill Clinton is sweating anytime anybody asks if his past scandals might impact Hillary's election. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, the other day we were talking about how Hillary Clinton's lobbyist bundlers, where she's not even talking to the lobbyists. The bundlers do, and they get promises, and they do the money. And many of these are tied to foreign banks and governments. And it is actually illegal for American political candidates to accept money from foreign sources. But the Clintons are masters of getting around that. Remember back in 1996, the Chinagate scandal, where the money from China in exchange for these transfers of sensitive technology was funneled through Chinese American citizens to get around the law. Same thing with Utah Gate, where Indonesians were sending money to the re-election campaign, in exchange for which Clinton created the Grand Staircase Escalade Monument, blocking access to that low-sulfur coal and forcing people to buy low-sulfur coal from Indonesia. See how it all works. Well, apparently there's a new development because the Democratic National Committee has gone to court requesting a court order to keep Hillary's donor and lobbyist list secret. Now, all of these are supposed to be public records, so you know who was out there buying your candidate, and the Democratic National Committee has actually gone to court saying, we have to keep this stuff secret. The voters don't need to know this information. Really, it'll just trouble their simple little minds, and we don't need to do that. We don't need to give them ideas to think about that we have not approved of. Now, over at MoveOn.org, somebody put up their own petition, put Hillary Clinton on trial, and it lists all the various laws that Hillary Clinton has violated. And it's actually a counter petition because MoveOn itself put on a petition basically saying it was time for everybody to stop using the Hillary for prison or Hillary for the pillory or just throw her in jail, to try and say, see, you know, the popular sentiment is there's been enough talk about Hillary going to prison. There's absolutely. So this counter petition was put up there. We put a link to it. And last time I checked, it's leading the other one. The put Hillary Clinton on trial is beating the other one that is trying to cover up for Hillary's crimes. Now, CNN is out there sort of with a red face because they put up an online poll following Donald Trump's speech. And they were looking for numbers where, you know, the people watching his speech were saying, oh, this is the wrong direction for the country. Boy, did they get a comeuppance. Their own poll came out with 73% of respondents say that Donald Trump is clearly pointing the country in the right direction. And CNN didn't like that. CNN also got caught cutting to commercial every time the Republican National Convention had speakers talking about how illegal immigrants murdered their children. Oh, here's another one of those victims of illegal immigration. Cut to commercial. We've got to go to commercial here. Now, WikiLeaks came out with an email dump not too long ago showing proof the Democratic National Committee was working with the corporate media to get her elected. Not too surprisingly, none of the corporate media are covering that story. Nor are they covering the more recent release of 28,000 emails from Hillary Clinton's server marked classified. This is way beyond what FBI Director Comey admitted to. And even that was damaging enough. Now it's 28,000 classified emails. Now, Ted Cruz is still feeling the sting from his attempt to grandstand the Republican National Committee, and it's cost him. He's basically imploding. Phil Robertson, the patriarch of TV's Duck Dynasty, who was originally a Cruz supporter, came on out and told Ted Cruz, Trump is the nominee, get over it. Even Sarah Palin came on out and said Cruz's comments were one of those career-ending read-my-lips moments. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and taking a quick back look at the Munich situation. The stories are all over the place. The reports of a second shooting in the city center have now been retracted. False alarm. And they're still out there saying terror, 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 multiple shooters, multiple shooters. But the witnesses are all saying they only saw one person shooting, and that was the guy outside the McDonald's, who is now being reported to have shot himself. So just like they took this road rage incident in Nice and try and blow it up into a terror attack, I think we have a lone shooter, and I'm willing to bet he was on prescription antidepressants again, and they're trying to take advantage of it and fan it up for propaganda purposes. Nobody's interested in reporting the truth anymore. Oh, we've got an incident. Let's spin it to our agenda here. Now, getting on back to Ted Cruz, who has really stepped in it with his speech to the Republican National Convention. And by the way, the Trump campaign is now saying that Cruz changed his speech after he submitted it to the Republican National Committee. And it was approved, and then Cruz went out and basically just said something else entirely. Cruz, from all the criticism he's got, he's now backed off, and he's saying that no, he will not be voting for Hillary Clinton come November, which is too little, too late. Now, for Democrats flying into Philadelphia next week for the Democratic National Convention, they're going to have a very interesting time because apparently there is a Trump supporter who happens to live right on that approach path to the Philadelphia airport. And she has painted one word, Trump, across her entire roof, where everybody flying into the airport is going to be seeing that. Of course, that's not the worst they're going to be dealing with because apparently the Philadelphia airport workers are going out on strike next week when the conventioneers are coming in and going out. So that's going to be putting everybody in a really wonderful, wonderful mood. Okay, Paul Ryan is apparently facing a serious uphill battle for his attempt at re-election because Paul Ryan is perceived as being very much in favor of the pro-Islamic migration agenda. And now he's come under fire for his long-standing support for open borders. Now he's facing opposition for the primary election from Wisconsin businessman Paul Nellen, who's running on a pro-America platform and saying the needs of the American people should be any member of Congress's first priority. And he's absolutely right. And he's leading in the polls. So Paul Ryan is out there with a new TV ad campaign trying to distance himself from the open borders issue and act like he believes in strong borders and America first. Because everybody understands that's going to be the election winner in November, putting America first, putting Americans first. Now, over in Turkey, so far they've arrested 10,000 people in the post-coup purge, including 287 police officers, 7,400 soldiers, 2,000 judges and prosecutors, and 686 assorted civil servants. Erdogan is basically cleaning his house. He's getting rid of all his opposition and dissidents, whether they had anything to do with the coup or not. Turkey has just announced they're suspending the European Union Human Rights Convention, which may forever kill the possibility of Turkey being in the EU. Another article coming out of Fourth Media. Turkey and U.S. pivot plan in serious trouble. Yes, it is. It's almost irrelevant how the coup came about at this point. The result of the coup is that the United States has lost their keystone player in their agenda inside Turkey. And Obama has, once again, officially denied any U.S. involvement in the failed coup. They're having to repeat the denial over and over and over again. Of course, we had nothing to do with the coup. Only a tinfoil hat wingnut conspiracy wacko would think we had anything to do with the coup d'etat in Turkey. Just because we were behind the last 4 coups in Turkey, and we've been behind coups in all these other countries since the end of World War II, there's no reason to think we... Well, now that it's been officially denied, we know it must be true. Meanwhile, when the coup was first going down, NBC came out with this story that Erdogan had been seeking asylum in Germany and then was turned away, which was fodder from some humor that this was the first refugee Germany refused to cross their borders. As it turns out, the story turned out to be completely false. It may have been a piece of propaganda to convince everybody in Turkey that Erdogan was already fleeing and the coup was a success. And if NBC is taking part in that, then that too indicates American involvement in this whole plan. But NewsBud, which is a brand new news organization being run by Sibel Edmonds and some others, is now demanding a public retraction and apology from NBC for this clearly unethical false reporting. Because there doesn't seem to be any source for any of that NBC put out. And then there was that other report where Erdogan was fleeing to Qatar. That one turned out to be fake. These were pieces of propaganda put on out there to convince people inside Turkey the coup was a success and stop fighting against the coup plotters. That's what these news pieces were for. And the American corporate media was out there covering it, promoting it, selling it, and that to me is more proof of U.S. involvement in this coup. Over in Syria, which looks to definitely be going back to the Syrians while the U.S. is still locked down on that encircling air base. Let's see. Terrorists sustain heavy losses in Army's offensive in Hama. Russian fighter jets intensify attack on terrorist positions in Latakia. Syrian Army launches fresh anti-terrorism offensive in eastern Damascus. Syrian Army forms new anti-ISIL popular force in Deir. Syrian soldiers continue to advance against militants in Aleppo. Syria terrorists fail to break through government positions in Quneitra. So it's all going very well for Syria and Russia and very bad for the U.S. agenda to topple Assad. France, responding to the Nice road rage event, and that driver was Tunisian, but France sees this as justification to deploy an aircraft carrier against ISIS and to supply Iraq forces with heavy weapons. Everybody's just looking for any excuse to escalate the war, even when it's ridiculous. A Tunisian runs over people in Nice, and France is off there bombing Syria and Iraq. It's ridiculous. Armenian opposition stages yet another rally in Yerevan, and it's flaring up over there. The whole world is on the verge of a global revolution here. The Houthis in Yemen are striking back. The U.S.-Saudi war on Yemen is in serious trouble. The people of Yemen do not want to live under U.S. puppet rule. That seems to be a sentiment that's growing across the globe. Another story coming out of Investment Watch blog. U.S. war in Afghanistan is fueling a global heroin epidemic and enabling the drug trade. Of course. It's one of the reasons they went in there. Under the Taliban, the opium traffic in Afghanistan had all but vanished. If you were caught with an opium poppy, they'd cut your hand off. A little extreme, but it did work. As soon as the U.S. goes back in, the poppies are blooming and the heroin is flowing into the streets of America and Russia, and they're not happy about that. And we have photos of the opium poppies being protected by coalition forces and the bags of harvested opium being loaded onto trucks by U.S. forces. And the U.S. government tried to explain this all away, saying, well, we have to let these opium farmers grow opium. What else would they do if we took that away from them? Well, they could go back to doing what they were doing under the Taliban. It's time to wake up and realize that the U.S. government is one of the biggest drug traffickers, if not the biggest drug trafficker on the planet. And the 2016 election was supposed to be about which dynastic ruling family would be in charge of all that illicit traffic. Another Bush or another Clinton. And it hasn't worked out for them. Okay, let's see. Iran has announced that their new S-300 missile defense system is now fully deployed, making airstrikes on Iran very problematic. Now, let's get back to the USS Gerald Ford. I have been including it in my list of very expensive, poorly performing weapons as an argument why we should not go any further on this war agenda. Because the equipment doesn't work, it costs way too much. F-35, F-22, Freedom and Independence class littoral combat ships, and I've mentioned the Gerald Ford before. Now there's been a new memo leaked from the Department of Defense saying that the U.S. Navy's Gerald Ford is unlikely to succeed in combat. They're literally saying this thing is not going to be an effective fighter. It doesn't work. $12.9 billion, the most expensive warship ever built, is still having problems with jets taking off and landing. The new magnetic launching system, which was supposed to free up additional room for aircraft by getting rid of the steam catapults, they can't get that to work. The memo is detailing 4 different systems that are seen as extremely unreliable and bring into question whether or not this could ever be an effective combat platform. Now, remember the other day we were talking about all these Iraq War families who started a crowdfunding project in order to fund a lawsuit, a civil lawsuit against Tony Blair? They went right through their funding target in just a matter of days. And the case is going to be moving forward. They're going to take phony Tony, they're going to put him on trial for the lies he told to the British people to get him into that war. The Chilcot report confirmed their suspicions, but the evidence of lies were out there all along. And I linked to my article, The Lie of the Last Century, which includes links to the Downing Street memo and Phony Tony's dodgy dossier. We knew all along they were lying to us. And it's about time somebody got caught up for that. Because, in my opinion, the highest of the high crimes and misdemeanors anybody, any leader can commit against their own people is to lie them into a war of conquest. Now then, France is considering bringing back the guillotine for radical Islamists. And meanwhile, the French Interior Minister is saying there is no link between the Nice road rage driver and ISIS or Islam. According to his family, he wasn't a practicing Muslim. He drank, he did drugs, he had, sex affairs, beat his wife. These are all forbidden under Islam. All right, I'm going to skip on down to a story that somebody asked me to please make a point of getting to. And let's see if I can find it. It's way down here. All right. This has to do with the assault weapon ban that just went into effect in Massachusetts. And apparently I misspoke. The legislature had nothing to do with this. Okay, the House and Senate in Massachusetts are on recess. This was an executive order written by the Attorney General Maura Healey. Now, Massachusetts already has an assault weapons ban, the same that the nation had from 1994 to 2004. And it targets these cosmetic features that make a weapon look nasty, like telescopic stocks made illegals. Now, gun manufacturers took it upon themselves to build Massachusetts-compliant guns that were built without the banned features so that they could be legally sold inside Massachusetts. And this is now what Healey has banned. The selling of these Massachusetts law compliant guns are now banned as of July 20th. And so it's just a complete draconian edict from on high. And apparently she's out there saying that any gun that shares similar operating systems and firing mechanisms with AR and AK assault weapons are copies of those weapons and thus illegal. This would make virtually every semi-automatic weapon, including hunting rifles and target rifles, illegal. She wants us to go back to bolt-action rifles or muskets to defend our homes from the criminals. All right, skipping on back up here to the top. We're going to talk about the economy just a little tiny bit here. A story coming out of the Investment Watch blog. The economy is doomed. Helicopter money will not work. They already tried that back in 2008 to deal with that economic crisis, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is very simple. When you take money away from the American people and you give it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to the people at interest, that's a great deal for the banks, but it's lousy for the economy as a whole. Everything government did in the wake of this situation was the wrong thing. It all helped the banks, and it harmed the general economy. And you cannot run a national economy purely on what's best for the banks. It doesn't work that way. The economy has to work for everybody, or you're in serious, serious, serious trouble. Now, Bix Weir is warning that we may see the economic collapse everybody's been concerned about before the November election. And that would definitely work for Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton. But historically, these crises do tend to come in the fall. And that's where we're heading into right now. Apparently, Mario Draghi, head of the European Central Bank, is now out there saying that the taxpayers have to pay the costs of the Italian bank meltdown. Have you ever noticed that any time the banks get into trouble, the first thing they say is, you got to take money away from the people. Yes, we messed up and we did terrible things and we were caught committing fraud, but really you've got to protect the banks at the expense of the people, because people don't matter. We've got too many of them anyway. Banks are sacrosanct. Banks are eternal. We must protect the banks at all costs. See how it works? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a couple of quick things I want to cover before the top of the hour and the lovely Lady Claire. We were talking the other day about how Peru is having a crisis because they've had a sudden cold snap there that is killing off the young alpaca, and they're already dealing with the economic hardship from that. Over in Brazil, the cold snap there has resulted in 36% crop loss of Arabica coffee beans, bananas 70%. Over in Argentina, they've lost 30% of their raisin crop. So John Kerry is out there saying that climate change is as dangerous as terrorism. They want that carbon tax. They do want that carbon. They need that carbon tax. All right, let's back up here and get a couple of stories about the police. First of all, Obama is already using these recent attacks on police, some of which appear to be staged false flag incidents involving trained snipers and then blamed on somebody in the neighborhood. And the White House is now pushing for the remilitarization of domestic police forces. As you know, there was a big stink over police getting armored vehicles and grenade launchers and all of these weapons of war. And recently, because of the pushback, a lot of these police departments were leaving the program and returning all these weapons. Well, that doesn't suit Obama, who needs the police force to be ready to protect him from an enraged American population. So he's using this recent spate of police deaths to try and build sympathy for the police and to build support to remilitarize America's police force. There's the agenda on display. Now, meanwhile, that North Miami stink where this police officer shot an unarmed black mental health worker caring for a patient has a new twist. The police union is insisting the bullet that struck that unarmed black man was actually meant to protect him. The police were going to shoot the autistic man. Oh, why were you shooting the autistic man? It's a lame excuse, but that's what they're out there trying to do. Apparently in Tulsa County, the sheriff's department left a paralyzed inmate lying on the floor of his cell for 5 days until he died. And they kept putting in cups of water, and apparently nobody realized he could not actually pick up the cups of water. Up in Pennsylvania, a man, Alexander Bernstein, spent 29 days in jail and lost everything he had, couldn't go to work, couldn't pay his rent, because the Pennsylvania State Police stopped him and thought the homemade soap in his car was cocaine. And apparently didn't even bother to test it. Just locked him up. Because the police are idiots. Now, down in Atlanta, Georgia, their mayor has rejected demands to stop allowing Israeli security companies to train the police there. Former California cop arrested for raping 5 women while on duty. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us for hour number 3. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And for those of you watching on BAM User, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who joins us on Friday afternoons with her unique perspective on the world. And so, what is your first story?
The Pentagon is in the process of revising a law on war policy, which treats reporters, read the independent media, like spies. And there was a lot of criticism when this came out in June of last year, and which pointed on the guidelines on journalists for speech and called for their repeal. And Mike, this is so draconian. Under the 2015 version, journalists could be treated as unprivileged belligerents, which entails even fewer protections than those afforded to prisoners of war and combatants.
And they've canceled that policy. Gee, I was having fun being considered a spy, you know, Agent 007, licensed to tickle. I shouldn't do that. Now we just pegged the needle again. Now that was my fault. My bad.
Now they're talking about it. They haven't done it yet. But what happens when a country's military criminalizes telling the truth? This is
We're seeing it today in Turkey. We're seeing it in Turkey. When criminalization of the truth occurs, you are living in a dictatorship.
Yeah, you know, and so I'm hoping that they're going to do it soon.
Well, I would certainly hope so too. Now, we're seeing this battle going on between the preservation of our First Amendment right to freedom of speech against a government that clearly wants the First Amendment to go away, and not just our government. Israel's trying to find a way to get rid of freedom of speech because we're ruled by a bunch of liars who are made very uncomfortable when the public has access to the truth.
Absolutely. And turning back over to the Republican convention, which was a very strange experience to witness this year, I have to tell you, for a lot of reasons, you know. But I am very grateful that Trump has won the nomination, and hopefully he will move forward to success in November. And there was a very interesting op-ed piece in Zero Hedge, which, if any of you have not seen it, I would encourage you to look, because they say some things that need to be said in a very straightforward and elegant way. And the title of this article, Trumped: A Nation on the Brink of Ruin and How to Bring It Back. And the gentleman who writes under the pseudonym of Tyler Durden said, for more than 3 decades, the nation's central banks have flooded the U.S. and world economies with too much free money, and Washington politicians have always accommodated the lobbyists, the bankers, and the racketeers, and the country's huge entitlement constituencies with too much free boot. So the real disease is bad money and towering debts. The actual culprits are the Wall Street Washington policy elites who have embraced statist solutions which aggrandize their own wealth and power. And that much, Durden says, Trump has got absolutely right. And that we have to throw out the careerists, the hypocrites, the ideologues, the racketeers, the power seekers, and snobs who have brought about the current ruin. And he said that's at least a start in the right direction.
We have to rebalance the economy.
Yeah.
Because for the economy, for any economy to run, There has to be ample supplies of currency at all levels of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be capital investment into all necessary sectors of economic development.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just have all the money sucked up by the bankers and spent on grand palaces for their own pleasure. Or the economy is doomed to collapse. And that's why everybody keeps saying our current economic system is built entirely on debt, and nobody could even begin to ever pay that debt off. Sooner or later, it has to crash. Now, we can count on our government doing anything it takes to keep the economy looking good until those November elections. I was mentioning a little while ago where Bix Weir is out there saying the crash that we're all afraid of is likely to happen in the fall because historically these crashes do happen in the fall. The crash of 29 happened in the fall. But we can count on our government to just keep cranking on out, money created out of thin air and pour it all over the financial sector to keep them looking good in order to help Hillary try and win in November. Because anybody looking at the economic decline of the United States of America understands that Hillary and the political system she is a part of have created this mess because these are people who don't know how to produce. They don't know how to create. All they have ever done in their life is take money away from one group and give it to their cronies. And that's all they know how to do.
Right, right. I'd like to walk on over to China, which I cannot see from here.
That way.
Yeah, I know. But there were a couple of very interesting articles today in Zero Hedge Global Research. And it talked about the encirclement of China. Well, we know that the U.S. is doing this, but apparently so are France and Germany, about to lead what are called freedom of navigation trips into that area. And more provocation, more picador, until they get China to react. So apparently this isn't just something with the United States. Europe is being encouraged as well to be running these navigations.
Well, the U.S. doesn't want to look like the sole provocateur. That's why they want the other ships in there. But again, the reason for this war is because the yuan is seen as a more attractive international currency than the U.S. dollar. So is the ruble. And I know a lot of people have a hard time getting their heads around the fact that this push to a new world war, which will, in all probability will go nuclear, is an argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're supposed to use for global trade and banking for the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then that was a big part of what World War II was about.
Yeah. Because if I remember correctly, Mike, Germany threw out their central bankers and went to a value-based unit of currency, and all of a sudden its economic engine was roaring.
Absolutely. They called it the German miracle.
Yeah.
Adolf Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year, I think, in 1937 for this amazing transformation of the German economy. And, of course, that made all of the private central bankers around the world panic because all of a sudden you had people saying, well, what they're doing in Germany works. Why can't we do it here?
Yeah,
and nobody really had a convincing answer for that.
Nope.
What are they going to do? Stand up and say, well, we're going to keep the current system because it keeps you enslaved to these private bankers. And that's just the way the world is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So they basically started ginning up some way to get, provoke Hitler into doing something that could be used as an excuse to declare war on him.
Yeah.
And again, if you've never read it, there's an article permanently in the top menu of WhatReallyHappened.com. All wars are bankers' wars. Yes, there are several different YouTube videos that have been made around that, but there's a lot more information in the actual online article, and I encourage you to read it. And all of a sudden, a lot of American history is going to make a lot more sense than what you were told in your public schools.
Right. I would like to go over to Turkey at this point. We do have some breaking news there. Power was restored today at the base at Incirkuk. But the question about the extradition of Gulen still remains unresolved. Apparently, Turkey has formally requested extradition. The paperwork has been put through. And Obama's between a rock and a hard place here, because if he does hand Gulen over to the Turkish authorities, the U.S. and the world will see that he blinked on this demand. And so, Mike, if I were to speculate, were I a betting person, I would almost be willing to bet a plugged Turkish piastre that Gulen is suddenly going to get very depressed and wind up committing suicide.
Or he'll drop a barbell on his own throat or something like that.
Yeah.
No, the problem here is that Gulen, his organization is very, very large. He himself is really old. He's a figurehead. But there are links between his organization and the Central Intelligence Agency.
Right.
We already have the U.S., having to repeatedly insist that they had nothing to do with this botched coup in Turkey. And if they send Gulen back to Turkey alive, Erdogan is probably going to put him on display as proof of Washington, D.C.'s treachery against even those countries that they're supposedly allies with.
And he's probably going to very vigorously interrogate him.
Probably that as well. I mean, they just pulled out of the European Human Rights Convention.
Right.
And so that means, they're going to come out with the tortures. And so it's a huge embarrassment for the U.S., and that's why I don't think that Gulen will ever get back to Turkey alive. No. Erdogan may get himself a freezer with a dead body in it.
Yeah.
As a compromise position, but he's not going to get him alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also have news of this state of emergency that's going to last for 90 days in Turkey. And it used to be applied only to the Kurdish areas. Now it applies to the entire country of Turkey. Erdogan is really centralizing power into his own hands. And
he's
that's
moving.
Getting a little scary.
Well, he's moving from a parliamentary state to a full-on Islamic presidential state. This is exactly the reverse of what the United States wanted. They've created this new Islamic strongman right in the middle of the Middle East, and they've made him an instant enemy. And while he cannot use or deploy them, Erdogan is still in physical control of those 50 B-61 tactical nuclear weapons, which are still on that base in Incirlik. The U.S. can't get at them. And at this point, given how fast he's moving, I would not be surprised if Erdogan grabs them and puts them in a warehouse. And immediately we have a new nuclear power in the Middle East to rival that of Israel.
Right. And, those 2,700 Americans, I mean, that's a little scary. If anything happens to any of them, I can see Obama literally looking at some sort of military option against Turkey.
Well, that's going to be the only way I think he's going to get those bombs back.
Yep.
Erdogan has said nothing more with the United States until I get Gulen. The U.S. can't turn Gulen over to him. It really is a rock and a hard place. They really botched this one up good.
Oh, yeah.
And, Turkey is turning to close relations with Russia. Erdogan is going to be meeting Putin the first week in August.
Right.
They're cozying up with Iran. Erdogan is out there saying, we will work with Russia and Iran to bring peace back to the Middle East. And that's an absolute slap in the face to the U.S. agenda.
And I've got to tell you, honey, if I were a foreign national in Turkey right now, I would cut my losses and get the heck out of Dodge immediately, if not sooner.
Well, unfortunately, our government is never able to admit error or wrongdoing or mistake.
Yep.
That's why they've stayed in Syria for 5 years, despite all the failures, the humiliations, the exposure of the lies about sarin gas.
Yep.
They can't back off. They've gone so far down this war agenda. If they quit now, the U.S. economy will implode immediately because those people who are still involved in the U.S. economy from outside the country are betting that the U.S. is going to be able to complete their plan to dominate the world's economy. And the instant they're convinced that's not going to happen, they're going to start pulling their money and going home.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, there have been some situations in Saudi Arabia that have been very disturbing. Current and former U.S. officials say a recent ISIS attack on the tomb of Muhammad in Saudi Arabia, which is Islam's second holiest site, shows that the terror group is now directly challenging the kingdom's ruling family and trying to topple the monarchy. And one of the Saudi king's title is Protector of the Two Holy Cities. And the message of these attacks is that that protection isn't there anymore. There's nothing they can do. And
well, what I think is going on, we know the United States is now coveting Saudi Arabia's oil wealth.
Right.
Saudi Arabia, like all these other Middle Eastern nations, has been straining at their leash. They're cozying up to Russia and China. They're selling their oil for currencies other than the dollar. And this release of the 28 pages was supposed to be the catalyst for an enraged American population to support a new military operation in Saudi Arabia.
Never happened.
They didn't get it.
Nope.
Because too many people actually read the 28 pages and realized it was all rumor and innuendo. We had that video of the Saudi government back in 2003 saying, please declassify this to end all the confusion. And so now we're starting to see the beginning of a smear campaign against Saudi Arabia in the media. And this ISIS attack on the tomb in Saudi Arabia, obviously the opening gambit to destabilize Saudi Arabia in order to bring about another regime change.
Yeah.
Same thing we saw in Ukraine, same thing we saw in Iran, same thing we see in Chile. This is how the U.S. has been doing this stuff all along.
And were I King Solomon, I would want to have an immediate chat with U.S. Ambassador Westphal over there as to what the darned heck the American-trained and supported ISIS was doing in Saudi Arabia. I would then remind him politely that if this crud does not stop, all Saudi investment over maybe $20 billion worth in the U.S. would be yanked immediately, putting the U.S. economy into a tailspin.
That would be a good thing for them to do.
Yeah.
And it all depends within that Saudi ruling family. I mean, they're not monolithically aligned.
No.
The new king is frankly not all there mentally, and the country is actually being run by the sons and the uncles and the brothers, each of whom have their own ideas about where Saudi Arabia should be going. Some are very much aligned with U.S. interests, others are not.
Right.
So it actually is a government that is ripe for destabilization operations right now.
Right. Oh, Mike, did you get to earlier in the show the Atlanta mayor has rejected demands to end Israeli police training?
Yeah, we actually covered that very, very briefly.
Okay. It's interesting. I have a few more things to say about that. And he said that he will not let go of the Israeli training. And it's a very interesting choice of words, considering that Israeli, Palestinian, and international human rights organizations, as well as the UN, have repeatedly condemned Israeli forces, including the police, for a huge range of human rights violations, particularly extrajudicial assassinations and executions of Palestinians. Maybe that's why it's happening here so frequently, is because they've been trained to do it.
Absolutely. And I had a whole bunch more of these police abuse stories to put on out there.
Yep.
Because unfortunately, contrary to the official government position, and even Donald Trump is wrong on this, the police are not always the good guys.
No.
They are a problem, and they have been made this way by deliberate government policy.
Yeah. And it's got to stop. It's not something that can stop with a soundbite, but people, communities have to get together and start talking with their chiefs of police, people of faith communities. There needs to be a dialogue, and this rush to be, judge, jury, and executioner on the part of individual police has got to stop.
The other thing that we need to look at, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, I think there's a bigger problem with those prescription antidepressants than we're even aware of right now. Because up until now, the only time we hear about the negative effects of prescription antidepressants is when somebody gets killed or commits suicide. But I think the problem is a little more of a continuum. And we had that story about this policeman who shot somebody unarmed, and the guy who was shot asked the cop, "Why did you do that?" And the cop said, "I don't know." And that's actually a classic symptom of prescription antidepressants basically messing with impulse control.
Yeah.
People on these antidepressants, they'll get an idea in their head and they just go with it. There's no consideration. There's no weighing of circumstances. And that statement by the police officer that he didn't even know why he just pulled the trigger on this guy, that tells me we're looking at a real problem. And that's going to have to be dealt with. Or we're going to continue to see violence in our society, not just from the police, but domestic violence, bar fights, road rage. The guy in Nice was loaded up on these prescription antidepressants. It's a big problem, but because it makes money, nobody wants to talk about it.
And apparently in France, they arrested 3 other alleged collaborators. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, they're probably rounding up people. We actually had a call into our show from a lady in Paris who said the police were actually on the street outside her home with the lights flashing and everything. And Holland may be doing something along the lines, a smaller scale version of what Erdogan is doing, using the road rage incident in Nice to just start rounding up people that he thinks are a problem.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, there is a camera system in France.
We're going to have to take a break.
Okay.
Right. Hold that thought.
I will.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And you had a follow-up. You wanted to talk about the idea of surveillance cameras in France and a rather interesting development along that issue.
Well, an urgent legal requisition was sent to Urban Supervisor Center of Nice Wednesday the 20th. The request evokes a desire to, quote-unquote, avoid the uncontrolled dissemination of these images.
Well, basically what the French government went down to Nice and said, destroy all the videos of all the cameras all around where that road rage incident happened.
Yeah.
They literally said, erase them all, delete them, 24 hours, either way, just get rid of them. We don't want anything getting on out there that might embarrass the official story. To their credit, the authorities in Nice said,
denied it.
No, we're keeping this. We are not going to destroy evidence. We don't care who tells us to.
Good on Nice.
All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a quick phone call. Mateus in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Michael and Claire. I got a question for the lovely lady, Claire.
Okay.
Are you familiar with a Christian pastor named named Ken Hovind, who just got out of jail as a political prisoner, mostly for exposing the New World Order?
I am not familiar with this person, but it sounds like you're very educated on this.
Yeah, okay. Ken Hovind, the Dinosaur Adventureland. It's somebody I was hoping that you might consider having as a guest. He could have an interview and not get religious at all, and just talk about the politics of why he went to jail for 9 years for sounding like Michael Rivero.
There's an encouraging thought there. I'll tell you what, we'll try and get in touch with him and see if we can bring him on. And thank you for the pointer. We're going to let you go and switch quickly to Greg in California. Aloha, Greg. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good evening, Mike and Claire. Mike, I've been in this a long time, federal law enforcement, the whole thing. We all know what's controlled and who is. So my point is, why do we keep talking about things that will probably never, ever turn around? I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, even though 2 Chronicles 7:14 will probably never happen as a country. But my bottom line is that, and I know you're in it, for a job, and I was in it for a job, and so we all know you're in a different position than I am. I'm a disabled vet. But what good does it do to keep talking about it when they're never going to release the purse strings or the control of the reins? So what good does it do? Because we know unless we stand up, like Mao Zedong said, the only result is at the end of a barrel, which nobody wants to do. What good does it do to keep talking about when are they going to do something? Are they going to do economic? Are they going to do a hologram in the sky? I mean, Mike, honestly, both of you, answer me just your opinion. What good is it going to be to assess their probable, because like 9/11, and I'll finish here, it's like we were all warned about when 9/11 was going to happen, but they, an FBI agent, that lady that ran for Congress in Wisconsin or wherever she was back there, she was warned, dropped the case. The economist of Russia warned us about 9/11. The head chief fire department or chief of New York City Fire Department was warned, and we never know when things are going to happen. And all everybody's doing is talking about whenever is it going to happen, like Pastor Butch and his people are saying it's going to happen. An ex-highway patrolman in North Carolina says, Lindsey Williams and just everybody. So what good does it do for us to even talk about it when we never will know when it's going to happen?
Okay, well, here's the situation. The reason we talk about all these things and expose all the wrongdoing is to basically undermine the credibility of the ruling structure. And it can have a positive outcome. And again, I point back to the collapse of the former Soviet Union, where the Soviet Union had their people under as firm mind control as the U.S. government used to have over the American people back in the 1950s and 1960s. But because people got onto their fax machines, the samizdat, and started sharing information about what the government was lying about, eventually public trust in the government eroded, public suspicion in the government advanced to the point where people stopped believing the lies. And at that point, the Soviet Union collapsed from its own internal rot and corruption. And that's exactly where I think the U.S. government is headed right now.
And that can happen. I mean, two examples that I would share with you. One is the example of Gandhi in India. We're going to have to take a break.
Yeah, and thank you for the phone call,
Yes.
Greg. We're going to let you go, and we'll finish answering this after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And again, I want to make something very, very clear. I do not advocate armed rebellion in the streets of the United States of America. The wrong people are going to get killed and crippled. And if there is one thing the U.S. government is really, really good at, it is killing people. And so we need to avoid that. It is possible to transition the nation into a new situation without a lot of bloodshed. And I keep going on back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, where the government lost the ability to lie to the public with impunity, and it simply fell apart. And we're in that same situation right now. If there's one thing we can point to as a victory of the independent media and the Internet, is that we have removed from the U.S. government and the corporate media their ability to lie to the public with impunity. And without that, they're at a loss. They're thrashing around right now. And you've got a lot of American people who do not trust this government, do not trust the corporate media, and that's a government that simply cannot function much longer when the public is not willing to go along. And our government, to be very honest, lacks the resources to go on out in the streets and simply beat 300 million Americans into doing as they're told.
It's not going to happen.
That's why the government rules with lies, fraud, and deception. It's less expensive than having to go on out and have overseers flogging us all into doing what we're supposed to be doing.
And the other examples that I would point to, Mahatma Gandhi changed the course of history in India, and his movement was completely pacifistic. He did not, no one raised a knife or a club. They just sat there. And that witness to history changed history. Also to the American civil rights worker, Dr. Martin Luther King, who paid with his life for his movement. But we are in it in the most peaceful way humanly possible to win it. And we, how long have we been on this crusade, Michael? Over 20 years now?
Over 20 years. We've been doing it so long, I don't remember how long I've been doing it. But, violence works to the government's advantage. Even if they have to fake it, like these police shootings. And now Obama's saying, well, we need to remilitarize the police. See, we never should have taken away their bulletproof armor and the rest of it. And we have seen the government trying to cause violence. We saw it back in the 1960s with COINTELPRO.
Right.
We saw them trying to stir up race riots with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. They were trying to, Baltimore, they were trying to stir up racial violence in front of the Republican National Convention. That didn't work because the American people are on to these kinds of dirty tricks. So, again, we do not encourage or advocate violence because it's going to work against us.
And also, if you have family members who are younger, and we both do, I have a wonderful...
It's hard to find one who's older.
I have a wonderful niece, and she has two beautiful children expecting her third, and we have a wonderful nephew from Mike's brother. We want this world better for all of these people because we understand what the dangers are, but what the possibilities are if we can get this country back on track in a peaceful and respectful way.
Definitely, I would agree on that one. The ugly reality is that if we don't change the course of this nation, we are looking at a new world war, which will be very prolonged, could possibly be nuclear, and that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing.
Absolutely. I would not like to go over, if you're okay with this, to Israel and a new report that's come out from Tubet Salem, which is a peace activist group in Israel. And of course, because they're peace activists, the Israeli media castigates them as left-wing. They're really not. But with the last war against Palestine, 63% of the casualties were civilians. And 63% of the 2,202 Palestinians killed by the IDF did not take any part in this conflict. Now, this figure is lower than the figure cited by the UN and other NGOs, but 70%, which is 70%, but still higher than what Israeli intelligence claims, which is only 50%.
Even 50%. That's,
yeah.
You know, you're not picking your targets. You're just shooting everything that moves, and that's a war crime.
Yeah, you know, and unfortunately, serial genocide is one of the most frequently used tactics by the Israeli government to implement its final solution to the alleged Palestinian problem.
Well, I mean, the reality is that all of the talk aside, Israel has no intention of reaching a peace deal with the Palestinians. They don't want a two-state solution. They don't want to share the one state with the Palestinians. They want the Palestinians to go away. Israel has succeeded in driving the vast majority of Palestinians into other countries where they're living in terrible conditions in refugee camps. But Israel's attitude is Israel for Israel only. And by the way, have you noticed, with all this talk about we must welcome the refugees and we should let the illegal immigrants in all over the world, the one country that won't do it is Israel, because their position is Israel for Israelis only. And that's supposed to be a good thing, but when we say we want America for Americans only, then all of a sudden everybody, including Israel, says you're being racist, you're being exclusionary, how could you, you're being elitist. And it's another one of these classic hypocrisies that Israel is constantly coming out with that the American corporate media will not point out.
Absolutely. But I would like to see some sort of international response or some sort of international anger, but I don't see it out there, Mike.
Well, the problem is, and by the way, there is another ship getting ready to try and break the Gaza blockade. But the problem is, playing within the system, people are always taking complaints up to the United Nations Security Council, and the United States will always veto them, making it very, very obvious that the U.S. government is totally under the control of Tel Aviv. We're living underneath puppet rulers who rule the United States on behalf of a foreign government. And the people of Iraq didn't like it, the people of Iran didn't like it, the people of Chile didn't like it, the people of Yemen didn't like it, the people of Libya didn't like it. Why should we be any more comfortable with that idea than anybody else on the world?
I hear you. I hear you. I'd like to go back over to Europe now, an article from antiwar.com, basically a very sober and intelligently written site. And the title of this article is We Never Seem to Learn. And it's talking about Obama going to the Warsaw NATO summit, reassuring the Estonians and other Eastern Europeans of Americans' guarantee of their security, while old wounds in his own country flared wide open. And the NATO budget is $1 trillion. It is 17 times as large as Russia's military budget. A lot of good things could be done at home with the American lion's share of the NATO budget in terms of police training, urban education, and improvement of the quality of housing and health care for Americans poor. But the writer said something about you need to sanely put some sense into Vladimir Putin. No, it's not Putin who needs to have some sense talked into him. It is this rather bellicose, war-centric administration which desperately needs to have some logic surgically implanted into their collective brains.
Well, from their point of view, they are being logical. They need to control global commerce and make everybody go through that U.S. dollar, and that means removing the threat of the yuan and the ruble. To them, it makes perfect sense because, after all, it's not their kids being killed and crippled on those front lines.
Yeah, it never is.
It's all you useless eaters. We don't have anything else to do with you, so here's a gun. Go on out and, kill the people we tell you to kill.
And it appears to me, Michael, that these troops and weapons which the U.S. and NATO have pre-positioned in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe, are harbingers of a war that the White House wants to see happen to prevent the rise of the Russian economy and the ruble post-sanctions. They also want to misdirect the anger of Americans in in which the economy at home has been mismanaged to the point where the American middle class has nearly gone extinct. And if internal Clinton and White House polls show Trump handily defeating Clinton in November, what I'm betting here, with my plugged Turkish piastre, is that there will be a tremendous haste to bring about such a war to hand Trump a full-going hot war and a destroyed American economy before he even takes the oath of office.
That's a very, very real situation there. Very real possibility.
Yeah.
If you go back and you study the history again of World War II, and it's in that All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, both in World War I and World War II, the problem was that Germany, because of their natural talents, resources, innovation, were manufacturing powerhouses. They were putting out products that people wanted to buy, and they preferred to buy the German products over those produced by Great Britain and the United States. Well, Great Britain and the United States didn't want to go through the trouble of improving their products to be able to compete against Germany. They simply arranged, we're going to have a war against Germany and destroy their industrial base, so that the world will be forced to buy our inferior products, and they'll think themselves lucky for getting those. And so they took this war, which actually began between Serbia and Austria-Hungary over the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and magically, in the media, Germany was made the enemy in World War I, even though they had nothing to do with the start of World War I. But it was necessary to destroy Germany's industrial base because they make products that we can't match in quality and cost. So we have to erase them. So the world is forced to come back and be dependent on British and American products. The same thing was happening in World War II. When Germany kicked out that private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles, and the German economy turned around, their technology took off, and they were making products that were a threat to those products being made in Great Britain and the United States. That's really what it's all about. We can't make a better car, a better ear of corn, a better currency, so the solution is we destroy those who can. And that is really the motive behind all of these world wars, and we're seeing it happen all over again.
Yeah, there was a marvelous Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. and Stephen Fry and other people I think you would know. But the character of Moriarty, who was, of course, the absolute poster child for the bad guy, made an observation, war is coming, and I want to have a leap on the bullets and the bandages. I want to corner the market. You know, the degree to which economy drives war is almost frightening.
You know, war is big business. War is good for business if your business is war. It's usually bad for everybody else. And that's really what it comes down to. And again, all wars are bankers' wars. And it always has been. All wars are inherently economic. Was that Trotsky who said that?
I think it was Karl Marx.
Well, yeah, Karl Marx.
Karl Marx.
All wars are essentially economic. Forget about the will of God and you know, holy war or war to bring democracy or war against an evil tyrant. It's always about somebody wanting to improve their economic position in the world at the expense of somebody else, whether it's by direct conquest and stealing their wealth and their technology, or simply by destroying somebody that they can't compete against in peaceful means. And that's been a continuing pattern.
Yeah. I'd also like to talk about the degree to which the government is spying on us. Highway Bluetooth detectors are spying on motorists and pedestrians. Apparently DHS and the Department of Transportation and probably the DEA are using Bluetooth detectors to spy on motorists and pedestrians. They gather the information from a wireless sensor network. The wireless technology that allows electronic devices to communicate directly with one another are, you know, it's amazing. Their open standard allows for the off-the-shelf equipment, detection range limited to about 328 feet. They're less expensive than other options, flexible installation, and a detection technology relies on drivers' use of Bluetooth-enabled devices. And apparently...
There's a problem right there, because I don't know about you. I don't even remember the last time I turned the Bluetooth on in my cell phone.
I don't think I have either.
Yeah.
But this, to me, Michael, is the act of a government that's absolutely terrified of its own people.
That may be the reason why they've mandated the use of Bluetooth headsets for drivers in their cars.
Yeah.
Here in Hawaii, if you're seen using your cell phone while driving, it's a $300 ticket.
Yeah, it's intense.
Forget all about that mapping technology to find out where you are and where the traffic jams are. You're not allowed to actually use it when you're in your car, and it would be most useful. And what I generally do is I don't bother answering the phone when I'm driving because I don't want to be distracted while I'm driving. So that's where it's going to break apart. Anybody who's doing something where they don't want to be spied on, it's trivial to turn the Bluetooth off.
Yeah.
This is another huge waste of money that is not going to produce any kind of a real result.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'd like to talk about the state of Michigan. Apparently, Michigan has gone totally police state with roadside saliva checks that they're planning. The Michigan State Police is working on plans to establish a pilot program for roadside drug testing, a spokeswoman said.
Mm-hmm.
A new law instructs the state police to pick 5 counties where it will run a 1-year pilot program for saliva-based testing to check drivers for drugs like marijuana, heroin, and cocaine. And apparently they're going to finalize this pilot program toward the end of this year. And I have to wonder about this, and I don't want people driving drunk or drugged. But, Mike, to me, this appears to be a blatant, in-your-face violation of the Fourth Amendment.
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah, the kits cost about $150 per testing unit, and I just have to wonder what kind of relationship the drug testing manufacturer who won this contract has with the state of Michigan. That sounds like an awful lot of money. And what about the reliability of such kits? And what happens, excuse me, to someone who refuses to take the test?
Go ahead and clear your throat. You're good. Okay,
Yeah.
Put you back up here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, we're finding out now where apparently a very commonly used drug testing kit by police has a high rate of false positives. People are being convicted with these things.
Yeah.
And you know something? This is what happens when you have a government that doesn't really know anything about what they're governing. Where some salesman from a company can come on in and say, we've got this new technology and it will protect you from terror and it will do this and it will do that. And these politicians will look at it, they'll look at the sales brochures and say, boy, this sounds like a really good idea. And then they'll buy into it. And they don't have the education and understanding to look at the claims and realize they're not actually going to be able to pan out. Remember when they bought that improvised explosive device detector for the soldiers in Iraq? It was a golfing accessory with a new paint job. I mean,
yikes.
You know, it's amazing. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, welcome back to the last segment of our Pauhana Friday show here. And Claire, I think you had a message you wanted to send out to all of our listeners.
Yes, please be kind. I know that these are very trying times. Please be kind to yourself, to everyone around you. Reach out to unify. Reach out to gently educate. Don't throw too much at people at one time or they're going to have that deer in the headlights moment. But do reach out in a very loving way to family, to friends, to people you know. Ask them if they're really aware of what's going on, of what's really happening out there. And just make sure, and I know I sound like a Chip CD on this, make sure to have emergency supplies, medical, pharmaceuticals if you need them, so that if something does happen, you're in a good place and you have them there with you. Make sure to develop a bug-out plan, particularly if you have kids in school. This is critical because there are some circumstances under which the school's not going to release your child. You have to know that. You have to see what the white paper is on that and figure out what you are going to do if for any reason things get unsafe where you are and you need to take yourself and your family away.
Okay, I want to step on back here to what you were saying about talking to each other.
Yeah.
We are all effectively part of the independent media. When we go on out and we send emails, when we post to social media, when we talk amongst ourselves and our friends, we're all now part of the independent media. And together, we are obviously going to be able to overpower the corporate media. We already have. That's why Donald Trump won that nomination. because the corporate media failed in its mission to convince us that we really wanted Jeb Bush or that we really wanted Ted Cruz. And I'm sure they're very nervous about that because the media's job is now to tell us how much we all want Hillary Clinton. And if we are all sharing with each other why we don't want Hillary Clinton, the corporate media is going to fail there as well. So you're all part of this now. And we rely on you to take what you learn from the website and the radio shows and take it on out into the general public and share it with other people.
And expand the What Really Happened family.
And the RBN family and the independent media family.
Right.
This is not just about what really happened.
No.
It's about a general growing public awareness of just how badly this country has gone wrong. It's just gone completely off the track.
And that awareness is going to have an effect in November. But it needs to be, as Michael is saying, an overwhelming effect. Trump can't potentially win by a margin of a few percentage points.
They'll take it away from him.
They'll wipe it out with voter fraud. So it's got to be a landslide. So please think about that over the weekend. Reach out to people you know, you care about, and inform them. Because we're all in this together.
And by the way, if Trump becomes president, the first thing I'm going to suggest he do is take sledgehammers to all those electronic voting machines. We have to have an honest election system in this country if we're ever going to regain control of our nation. And it is our nation.
Right.
It's not for sale to the illegal immigrants or Wall Street or Israel. It belongs to us. And government does not have the legal right to sell property it does not own. There's the music. Time for Claire and I to get on out of here and get ready for Tropical Storm Darby. And a reminder, if the storm is a bad one, we may not be live on Monday, but Darby willing, we'll be back live Monday on Republic Broadcasting. So have a good weekend and aloha, America.